Welcome back, viewers. You're watching World DNA with me, Adya and Diksha. And right now we are joined by Adrian Caramel. So, Adrian, coming back to the aspect of what we were discussing right now, you see Donald Trump insists that Iran has been begging for a deal with the United States, whereas Tehran senior leaders are saying that no, there is no such negotiations that has been happening. So how do you assess all of this? And do you think that, this would change the course of this war?
Yeah, I still have to go back to the fact that I don't see who could possibly be negotiating with Trump. I look at some of the figures. Galibov is one of the most senior figures that's been named and kind of thrown around the media as the person that they could possibly be talking to. He's denied all claims of even doing so. So it's there are some real points, some real sticking points that we will never meet on. And Trump saying that they're willing to make serious concessions, that means that they're willing to give up their nuclear program, they're willing to give up their ballistic missile program, they're willing to stop funding proxies, Hezbollah, Hamas, Houthis, all the proxies in Iraq. Those are a lot of big asks, and I can never, from having been up against individuals connected to the regime on panels, I know they will never give those things up. It's just not in their DNA. Right now, it's about regime survival. And I know survival for some people think that, yeah, that makes sense. They're rational actors. There's individuals wanting to cut a deal. But until you get to a certain level in that government, and that's way, way down, I don't think you're going to find a person that will want to cut a deal with the United States.
Absolutely,
ever.
That is a fair point, Adrian. And despite the claims of leadership change, and as you mentioned, the name of Mohammad Bagher Ghalibaf being brought up, we understand that he is no Delcy Rodriguez and Iran is no Venezuela. And the continued survival of the Islamic Republic appears to have only emboldened Tehran at this point. And it is believed that Iran has both time and geography on its side, according to many analysts. What would it actually take for Tehran to step back at this particular time in the conflict, according to you?
Yeah, another great question, Diksha. What I think with that leadership right there, now individuals like Ghalibaf, Vahidi, Mohsen Rezai, there's some top-level players. And I'll point back to the Ali Larijani strike. These are individuals that have grown up through the ranks of the IRGC or the Ministry of Intelligence Services or both apparatus. They have had tremendous power over the population and those structures which hold power of the economy, of the security of the country. Once you remove one of them, they don't have a lot of people with as much talent and the connections and I would say, the fear element that when, Ali Larijani said to do this, people jumped up and did it. It's almost like removing a Qasem Soleimani from the battlefield. You can't really find a replacement for that type of guy. So as soon as they start to remove some of these individuals, then you may find that, that person that's willing to negotiate. But I think, it's, again, the president of the United States, Trump, Netanyahu, have stressed for the Iranian people to stay in their houses, do not go out in the streets. And I think they will eventually get that message, because I do think there are a defined set of targets that are over 8 weeks long. We're halfway through. And now Trump's trying to figure out how to finish this off.
Right, Adrian, and even though Trump says that the US, it doesn't rely on the Strait of Hormuz, but how would a disruption there impact all global oil markets? Because we are seeing that happening, and countries heavily dependent on the Gulf energy, where Trump also stated that it doesn't impact the country, but quote unquote Iran has given him a very expensive gift by letting the ships pass through it.
Yeah, by letting those ships pass through it, I think it does kind of grease the global economy to a certain degree. The United States, for what we're paying at the pump, or as far as oil coming down through the Strait of Hormuz, I think it's only about 3% for the United States. But when you talk about the other countries, especially Asia, Southeast Asia, you name it, they are going to be impacted because Kuwait's going to have a problem, UAE's going to have a problem. They're all going to have a problem getting, and that's going to eventually impact American consumers when they go to go to any store, that's going to drive up costs. I do think the Strait of Hormuz is going to be a relatively short-term problem. Just today, the United States or Israel eliminated the individual responsible who's engineering this whole blockade right now. So you can see the kinetic actions are still taking place, and I think they're still trying to. I truly believe that the biggest concern are the mines. They're worried that they have been indiscriminately mining, and in order to guarantee safe passage, they need to make sure that a tanker doesn't bump into a mine somewhere or along the way.
Right, Adrian, and at the same time, President Trump's option, if you look at it, they may be expanding because with the deployment of around 5,000 U.S. Marines and paratroopers from the 82nd Airborne Division, of course, they are being deployed, but this is not without risk. In any ground operation, of course, raises the prospect of casualties. We already know that some nearly 300 American soldiers are already injured. Now, of course, the question is, does Washington really have the appetite for deeper involvement in the region, given that it's also expressed deep mistrust for NATO and its transatlantic alliances already is come into question? Now, given all of this backdrop, do you think it would actually be willing to send troops on the ground, and we could be looking at a protracted conflict here?
Those are great questions, Diksha. I don't see it being protracted. I do think there is a possibility that one of the smaller islands that no one talks about that has actually been used to manage and shut things down, and it's called Rock Island. There is the possibility of seeing U.S. troops take that island to make sure that it's not a staging ground for the IRGC Navy and a place where they can coordinate the blockade. But I know there's been mention of Karg Island and some of these other places. I don't see that happening. And there isn't, you're exactly right, there isn't an appetite back home for the United States. And I do believe that positioning, as some people have mentioned, troops on Karg Island, which is way up the Persian Gulf. That's it's unnecessary. Number one. Number two, it puts our soldiers in real danger. It's hard to protect, and there's just no strategic sense behind it. So, I think it's more force projection, but I don't, it's me just kind of reading into what we're sending into the region.
Absolutely, Adrian. And there is still a lot of fog around the claims, and the counterclaims were emerging. But for now, thank you so much for helping us sift through them. And always, it's a pleasure to have your insights on the show. Thank you.
Thank you.